It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10, our top story. Missions, milestones, but no mention of migration. The Prime Minister's pledges to the public as he urges them to hold his feet to the fire.
Make no mistake, this plan will land on desks across Whitehall with the heavy thud of a gauntlet being thrown down.
The most exacting pledge of all to end backlogs in the NHS, as the latest data shows the service under pressure from an early winter outbreak of flu. Also tonight, deny, defend and depose, the words written on the bullets that killed a healthcare executive, as police issue this image of the suspect. The Islamist rebels taking another city in Syria as they advance closer to the country's capital. The little boy lost to breathtaking neglect by parents who had opted out of society and buried his battered body in their garden. Why NASA's next giant leap to the moon just got longer, the delay before astronauts walk on the lunar surface once again. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages. That is in our press preview from 10:30 right through to midnight. Hello there, good evening. Less than 6 months ago, Sir Keir Starmer was setting out Labour's election manifesto and its 5 national missions to, he said, end the chaos. It's the first months of the new government, though, that have at times seemed chaotic, whether with the resignation of the Transport Secretary or the replacement of the Prime Minister's own Chief of Staff. And today, Sir Keir stood in front of the country again, now pledging 6 new milestones by which he wants to be judged. Well, the milestones mark the government's plans on a range of issues, though not crucially on migration. The first, to raise living standards by the next election in every region of the country. Next, to build 1.5 million homes in England and fast-track planning decisions. The NHS has its own pledge to end hospital backlogs with a target on reducing waiting times. The Prime Minister also said there will be more police officers back on the streets in every community. Additionally, Sir Keir Starmer wants to get 75% of 5-year-olds ready to learn when they start school and secure what he calls homegrown energy and put the UK on track to produce at least 95% clean power by 2030. Our political editor, Beth Rigby, has this report.
A new slogan and the stage set for a Prime Minister with a new script. Here at movie-making Pinewood Studios to kickstart his government after what's been anything but a box office opening.
Today we publish new milestones, measurable milestones, that will also give the British people the power to hold our feet to the fire.
6 targets to judge his government, raising living standards, ending hospital backlogs, building 1.5 million new homes, targets too on policing, education and green energy.
Make no mistake, this plan will land on desks across Whitehall with the heavy thud of a gauntlet being thrown down.
The PM says it's the most ambitious plan for government in a generation, challenging the British state to deliver.
I do think that too many people in Whitehall are comfortable in the tepid bath of managed decline.
He says he's taken the fight to blockers and will build 150 major infrastructure projects he knows voters want and need to see his government getting things done.
I'm convinced that if we can show that politics can change Britain for the better, then we can face the future with confidence.
But in this plan, one massive issue conspicuously missing: no concrete target on tackling immigration. You have not given the public one metric on which to measure you when it comes to migration. Is that because you fear failure?
No, Beth. The way we've constructed it is that there are foundational things that a government must do, and they are based on security. So national security is obvious. But border security is equally obvious in my view, and that's why I've said we are committed to bringing down immigration, both legal and illegal.
And ministers defensive. People are really concerned about migration. There is no measurable, there's nothing on the banners. What on earth is going on? I think that could come back to bite you, couldn't it?
Well, we've had record numbers of people deported that shouldn't have been here, over 9,000 since we got...
Top priority for the public and nothing in nothing on them. Why is it not a milestone on which the public can measure you if it is such a priority for this government, which apparently Keir Starmer keeps telling me it is? It doesn't make sense.
Well, it's the underpinnings of everything else we do. So it is clearly, therefore, a central priority for the government and certainly for me as Home Secretary.
First, there were 5 missions, then there were 6 steps, 2 priorities and now 6 milestones. It has at times been a bit confusing. What is the message? Well, today the Prime Minister has announced 6 targets, tangible targets for you to measure his government on in an attempt to reset with the public and communicate better with you. It's in places like Bishop Stortford that he needs this message to land. Traditionally Tory voters here back Labour in the election.
Well, I think the dog would make more sense to the politicians, frankly. No, seriously, I think we're let down by all sides of the parties.
I think they've got the right intentions, but they're struggling to get their message across, I think, is the problem.
Yeah, I think they're struggling at the moment. They are proving to be rather unpopular with their cuts to certain benefits.
This may be the season of goodwill, but there's not much of it about for this new government. The Prime Minister hopes over time hitting milestones might change all of that, but he has to deliver. Beth Rigby, Sky News.
Whether Sir Keir Starmer can deliver on his plans might depend on which you choose to look at. The government is already on course to reach some, like the pledge to raise living standards, but others, notably the focus on waiting lists and the NHS, are more exacting. Our economics and data editor, Ed Conway, has been looking at the numbers.
A new set of targets from the government. We're just going through them and perhaps also reminding ourselves of the old targets, perhaps the most striking of which was to try to have the fastest growing economy in the G7, the group of 7 industrialised economies around the world, the US, Italy and so on. And what this chart's showing you is where those growth ranges are in the coming years, according to the latest IMF forecast, and that from the fastest through to the slowest. And the reality is, look, the UK is not going to be the fastest, at least if the IMF is to be believed. We are quite far from being the fastest economy through almost all of the next parliament. And that goes for overall GDP, but it also goes, if you kind of divide the amount of income that we're making per head of the population, gives you a better sense of how well off we're feeling. It also goes for GDP per capita. So we're not going to be the fastest. That target looks pretty impossible, very difficult to meet. Which is why perhaps we have this new target. And this target is somewhat different. This is saying, also it must be said, less ambitious. We must get real household disposable income per head rising over the course of this parliament, OK? And this is the line of real household disposable income per head, the level of it. It fell quite a bit during the energy price shock. It was forecast before the budget to rise quite steadily in the next few years. But then, of course, bear in mind, this takes into account, the money that's coming out of your pocket from inflation, but also taxes. And there were higher taxes in the budget. And so look at what happened to this line after the budget. The budget actually brought this line down. OK, so it's still a pass. It's still within pass territory, but it's less convincing than it was before as a result of government policy. So worth just noting, and that's the new growth target as far as we can work out. Bobby's on the beat. The plan is to raise the number of people, of police officers, community support officers that are out there by 13,000. It sounds like a lot. Worth just noting, this line is already rising, OK? So if you just take that line, that trajectory, and carry it on, you are talking about it going up more than 13,000. That being said, people within the forces say it's quite difficult to recruit right now. So maybe 13,000 will be something worth talking about. Finally, and perhaps the most ambitious of all, is this. This is the NHS waiting list target, and it's about getting the percentage of routine elective operations within 18 weeks. So, those operations happening within 18 weeks, getting that number back up to where it was before the pandemic. Back then, it was around 90-ish%. It came down. It hasn't really recovered. And the hope is you get back up there again. But you can probably tell, looking at this line, that would be a big achievement. And perhaps, you know, the hope is that's where all of the NHS money is going to go. But that's ambitious, perhaps more ambitious than any of the other targets.
Ed Conway there. Well, let's speak now to Beth Rigby. She's in Downing Street. And Beth, here we go again. An attempt again today to set the political agenda. But was it an opportunity missed?
Well, Anna, the first thing I would say is it was billed as a big moment. It was, if you like, turning that promise of change that Keir Starmer talked about during that election campaign into what he described as the plan for change. It wasn't, his aides were keen to stress, a reset, but rather a continuation of that journey he has been on since he became Prime Minister. And it comes after 5 months in power when the polls for Labour are plummeting. But I have to say, it was a bit woolly. We've had the missions turned into the first steps, then the manifesto, and now we have the milestones. Some of the things they announced today, they have announced before. Other things were changed, and it does feel a little bit confused. I'm a bit confused, and I cover it all the time. There are lots of different targets and shifting sands. But saying all of that, what the attempt of today was to do is to show you out there back home that there are 6 measurable milestones on which you can judge Keir Starmer and his government. And some of them are really stretching. 1.5 million new homes, 150 infrastructure projects. You heard Ed there talking about what they want to do on the NHS. So some of it is stretching, others less so. At least it sets in train what the Prime Minister is clear he wants to do. Because it wasn't really just a speech for you back home. It was also for around here, for Whitehall. You heard him talk about needing to galvanise civil servants and get government behind what he wants to do. And there is a message there, I think, a realisation after 5 months in this place that if they don't do that, they've got no hope of delivering in the run-up to an election. And I think that there is an expectation around this place that it's not necessarily going to shift the dial, that you might not yet be tuning in to what Keir Starmer's all about, that he might not really have set a good story or a narrative, but what they have set are targets and deliverables. And the hope is that if they can show that they are doing it, then the tsunami of cynicism will begin to turn in his favour. I have to say, though, missing out migration in one of those measurables, I think will be something that maybe the public will question and also will be used, certainly by his political opponents from the Conservative and Reform camps.
Beth, with your assessment outside Downing Street, thank you. Well, as the Prime Minister put the NHS at the heart of his milestones for government, new figures revealed the scale of the pressures facing the health service this winter. There's been a near 4-fold increase in the number of patients in England in hospital with flu compared to this time last year. Our health correspondent, Ashish Joshi, saw the pressure for himself.
Emergency ambulance. Is the patient breathing?
Our emergency services are stretched.
We're organising help for you now. Just stay on the line.
In London, like elsewhere across the country, ambulances are at their highest level of alert.
We took 7,000 calls.
An early flu season contributing to a 10% increase in calls than at this time last year.
We want to be able to come into a job and do it well, but with the increased workload, you do find yourself, wanting to give the best of your ability, but sometimes you are, stretched to your maximum and you have hard days and difficult calls.
Hello again, Mr. Pearson.
And that pressure is also being felt in emergency departments. Ian was rushed to Preston Hospital by ambulance after suffering a fall caused by pneumonia. That was almost 3 days ago.
It's like a car crash on the M6. Honestly, it just never stopped.
I think what the Prime Minister should do is he should have been here on Sunday night when the corridors were full of people. Every available space was full of people waiting to be seen by A&E.
Here, there are around 115 patients being treated in a space designed for 45.
There are patients who are medically fit, who we've done everything we need to in an acute hospital, but they're just not well enough to be at home. They need care packages, they need placements, and where there are delays in getting that into place, they occupy the hospital bed, and it's not free for the patients who are coming in.
Preston's respiratory ward is already full.
Why are you so busy? Why is every bed taken?
Flu, COVID, other viral infections, RSV, all of them trigger exacerbation of underlying conditions.
And we haven't even hit peak flu season.
Yeah, unfortunately, this is a reality, and we are seeing a tremendous surge in the admissions. And by the time they're ready to go out, there's another patient already here, ready to be admitted.
Judy feared for the worst when Ian was rushed to hospital. They'll be relieved to get home, just as the winter pressure intensifies. Ashish Joshi, Sky News in Preston.
Well, despite its problems, the NHS was rated the institution that made us proudest to be British in a poll to mark its 75th birthday last year. The situation in America is very different, with millions of people either uninsured or denied cover by their health insurance providers to pay for the care they need. That, tonight, appears to be the most likely motive in the killing of the head of one of the country's top insurers, after the bullets that killed him were found to have been inscribed with the words deny, defend and depose. Well, our international correspondent Diana Magnay is in New York for us tonight with the latest. Diana.
It is a macabre twist, isn't it, that the bullet casings should be inscribed with words which seem to reference how insurance companies here avoid paying for care. And second to that, there are a lot of details which are now coming out, which read a bit like a thriller, if you forget the tragedy at the heart of this story. Let's just take a look. Two new images released by New York police of the gunman wanted for the murder of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson, unmasked and smiling. A homicide in the heart of Manhattan, premeditated, targeted. A $10,000 reward for anyone who can give information on this man. Business as usual outside the Hilton Hotel where it happened. But according to a source in law enforcement, bullet casings left at the scene were inscribed with the words deny, defend, depose. Possibly a play on the title of this book about the health insurance business and how the man on the street can fight back. And if so, a potential motive of sorts for targeting a man in charge of millions of Americans' health insurance. The killer made his getaway down this wide alleyway before cycling towards Central Park, with a pit stop at a nearby Starbucks before the killing. From those photos, you can see that the gunman came to this Starbucks shortly before he moved on to the Hilton Hotel. He was recorded on the CCTV up there, and these are the same tables and chairs that were in the background of those photos. And we understand that he bought a bottle of water and a couple of energy bars or protein bars and then threw away the wrappers, which are now key pieces of evidence in the case. And just across the road, a rack of city bikes, which we know the killer used to flee the scene. New Yorkers shocked at what's happened, hazarding a guess at motive if this was about the nation's health insurance.
It's unfortunate for citizens here to have to afford some of these insurances. You know, there's ways to afford it, but there's a lot of people that don't have access to those ways.
We're the richest country in the world, and we don't have free health care for our people. Yeah, it's very unfortunate. People go into debt with medical bills, and that's not how it should be. But this probably wasn't the right answer to go about it either.
With visuals of the gunman's face, it is surely only a matter of time before he's ID'd. Police honing in on this hostel in the Upper West Side, where he's believed to have stayed. But for now, the manhunt to bring him in continues. He did seem to be proficient with a gun, but perhaps less so at leaving a trace. We await police findings, but he does remain at large, and we've heard nothing from the police today as they carry on their investigation.
Diana in New York, thank you. A couple who buried their young son in their garden were accused of breathtaking arrogance and cruelty today. The body of 3-year-old Abaya was only found 3 years later. He had suffered fractures and severe dental decay. His parents told police they had an off-grid lifestyle and had renounced their British citizenship. A warning: this report from Molly Malone contains content some may find distressing.
What shall I say? Abia was just 3 years old when his life ended. His body was buried at the end of his parents' garden. Having died of a respiratory disease with broken bones, severe malnourishment and tooth decay.
My child's name's Abia. Where is he? That's not your business. What?
This is his father, Ty, being arrested.
I am an Indigenous person of this vicinity, this territory, this personal space right now.
And his mother too, Naomi. Both of them, his parents, the people who were supposed to protect him, found guilty of child cruelty, of causing or allowing Abia's death, as well as perverting the course of justice. Living in a house that looked like this, the prosecution said the couple failed to properly feed Abia or get medical help. The pair followed a restrictive vegan diet and believed in a system that rejected the services of the state, like healthcare or traditional medicine.
This is an incredibly unusual case in terms of the beliefs of the parents and the fact that they've effectively caused the death of their child and then managed to successfully conceal his death from agencies for so long, and in the way that they've done it by burying him in their own back garden. At the time, they say that they buried him in line with their cultural beliefs. However, I reject that. I would say that they have buried him to conceal the fact that they caused his death.
Abia's body was in the ground for almost 3 years before being found.
It smells.
After having been evicted from their home in Birmingham, where Abia was buried, the court heard how the couple then went to live in a shipping container and then a caravan in Glastonbury, more than 100 miles away.
Yay! King Abia!
Abia's short-lived life was far from conventional, cut off from society and from the services it offers to keep people safe.
Do you look like me? Do you look like me? Huh?
And then his death too, disguised for years. Molly Malone, Sky News.
Syrian rebels claimed another major city in their rapid advance against the forces of President Assad today. They say they've liberated Hama, the scene of some of the biggest protests during the Arab Spring at the beginning of the country's civil war. Our Middle East correspondent, Alistair Bunkle, joins us now from Jerusalem. So another major advance. How significant will this be then, not least ultimately for President Assad?
Well, I think it's hugely significant. The fact that they took Aleppo over the weekend came as a real surprise, but they have continued their advance. They've pushed south by more than 100 miles. They've now taken the city of Hama itself, a very significant city in Syrian society. It was the scene of a massacre in 1982, really orchestrated by Bashar al-Assad's father, Hafez al-Assad, and his uncle, Rifat. And then it was also during the Arab Spring where the uprising in Syria started. So it's hugely symbolic that they've managed to take Hama, and the fact that the Syrian armed forces, the government armed forces, pretty much just melted away. They withdrew out of the city, they say, and their commanders say, in order to avoid civilian bloodshed and to prevent what have been very fierce fighting within the streets. But I think a lot of people are making the assessment that the Syrian armed forces are a shell of what they were and perhaps can't put up the fight that they need to stop this advance. If you look at a map, you can see the extent of the move made by the rebel forces from Aleppo, or the outskirts of Aleppo, through Aleppo and then south towards Hama. They're still some way away from Damascus, but they are close to the next big city of Homs. We don't know whether that is what they're going to aim at next, whether they will go there quickly, whether they'll consolidate their positions and take their time. But if Homs were to fall, then I think that really potentially could be the beginning of the end for the Assad regime. So President Bashar al-Assad, who's been in control of Syria for so many years, his family have controlled it for many decades, is now facing humiliating defeats in some of the key cities in the parts of the country that he did control, and he will not be feeling safe in the capital, Damascus.
Interesting times indeed. Alistair, thank you. The Olympic dressage champion Charlotte Dujardin has been suspended from competing in the sport for 1 year, following an investigation into a video showing her repeatedly whipping a horse. A warning, you may find the pictures we're about to show you upsetting. Well, with 6 Olympic medals, including 3 golds, Dujardin is Team GB's joint most decorated female Olympian of all time. She withdrew from the Paris Games this summer after a video emerged showing her repeatedly whipping a horse during a training session. Today, she has apologised again for her actions seen in this video. The French President Emmanuel Macron says he will stay in power until the end of his term, despite today's resignation of Prime Minister Michel Barnier. The former Brexit negotiator lost a vote of no confidence last night after forcing through controversial budget legislation without a vote by MPs. Mr Macron says he will name a successor within days.
Mr Musk, how's power feeling, sir? How's power feeling, Mr Musk?
Yes, Elon Musk is on Capitol Hill today holding meetings about his plans to cut down the size of the US government once Donald Trump takes power. Mr Musk, with his son on his shoulders, was keeping tight-lipped, as you saw, over plans to cut regulations, cut spending and headcounts within the federal government with the newly announced advisory team. Now, he doesn't believe in COVID or that humans are causing climate change. And he told us that President Putin is a patriot, though he's not a fan. He is Calin Georgescu, an ultra-nationalist independent, and the candidate expected to win Romania's presidential election. He won the first round of the election with more than 2 million votes, to widespread surprise. In the past, Georgescu has praised the Russian President Vladimir Putin as a man who loves his country and called Ukraine an invented state. Still, he claims not to be pro-Russian. Well, Romania is strategically important. It borders Ukraine and is close to the Black Sea, facing Russian-occupied Crimea. It joined the NATO alliance back in 2004 and is the site of one of the NATO alliance's largest air bases. Our Europe correspondent, Adam Parsons, reports now from Bucharest.
Here's the man who's rushed from obscurity to the brink of political power. Calin Georgescu, favourite to be Romania's next president. An unabashed populist, his popularity skyrocketed thanks to a TikTok campaign. Romanian security services think it was pushed by Russia. Georgescu's critics have said he's broken campaign rules and that he's dangerously fond of Vladimir Putin. Georgescu told me he denies it all.
Vladimir Putin is, in his country, is a leader, is a patriot, but I'm not a fan of Mr. Vladimir Putin. I take care about my people and Romania, and of course I shall take care about my country.
Also clarify, you said you didn't spend anything on your campaign.
Yes.
The Secret Service says you spent €1 million.
Yeah, it's their problem. It's not mine.
Over the border in Ukraine, the fighting continues. Georgescu's politics are all about putting his country first, of scepticism about the global elite. So does he have a plan to take his country out of NATO or the EU?
I don't against NATO or European Union. It's fine. It's absolutely, how I can say, very good. The only point which I said many times, I have nothing to do with these two clubs. It's fine to be like this. Absolutely no problem, but the only point is we have to negotiate our interest.
He's also a self-professed Donald Trump supporter and insists scientists have got it wrong on COVID and global warming.
Yes, climate change exists, but is not the human being who can do that. But climate change is a natural matter.
And do you believe in COVID?
I don't believe on that. Nobody have seen. Did you see? the COVID.
Well, I've had COVID.
Look, no, did you see the
did I see the virus?
Virus, yeah.
Well, it's microscopic, so no, I can't.
I don't know. Nobody have seen. But, you know, I'm confident in the immunity of what God made for us.
The first round of the election propelled Georgescu into the limelight. The second round is on Sunday, and it may well carry him to the presidency. Adam Parsons, Sky News, Bucharest.
Finally, it's been 52 years since astronauts last walked on the moon, and NASA confirmed tonight we're going to have to wait a little bit longer to see them return. Problems with the heat shield of the Orion spacecraft, which will be the crew's home during their flight to lunar orbit and back to Earth, mean the plans for the mission need to be changed. It means astronauts are not now scheduled to land until 2027. Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the press preview tonight, joined by the Times chief political correspondent, Aubrey Allegretti, and the FT's Whitehall editor, Lucy Fisher. Great to see both of you. Among the stories we will be discussing, this spiky take on the Prime Minister's big speech from the front of the Daily Mail. The headline, Starmer's bingo hall parade of buzzwords and political nerd speak. That and possibly more heartening for the PM assessments too. Back in a moment.